All right. It is 9:58 p.m. and we are going to talk about a movie. A really long movie that we just watched called The Last Samurai. You can see Tom Cruise's beautiful face right there behind us.
A legend.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The Last Samurai is my favorite movie.
And it is definitely one of my in my top 5. It's an awesome
just
movie.
A solid movie, and so it's a great one. If you're gonna review movies, it's an excellent movie to start on. Clocking in at 2 hours and 32 minutes, and we're gonna take you through it. Whoever may be watching, we are going to take you through what we think about this. First of all, how does this movie set up? Basically, Tom Cruise there behind me plays a fellow named Nathan Algren, which is cool. My name is also almost Nathan. So. But Nathan Algren was a U.S. cavalry trooper. It alludes that he fought in the American Civil War against the Confederates. Secondly, with the United States Army against the Cheyenne and possibly others. That's an Indian tribe. And it picks up with him being sort of toted around the United States as sort of a war hero, but he's very guilty about all of the war crimes he's committed. He hates his job, but, and the inciting incident of the film, he's offered this new gig teaching the Imperial Japanese Army the ways of Western warfare, and it picks up from there as he sails into this new land where there's going to be a large conflict going on that he is not aware of. So that's basically the setup of how this works.
All right, and then so this movie was directed by Edward Zwick, who is also of Glory fame, which came out in 1989, so a good 14 years before this, because this movie obviously came out in 2003. It's written, let me pull it up real quick, it's written also by Edward Zwick, along with Marshall Hershkovitz and John Logan. John Logan also wrote such movies as Any Given Sunday, and the year after this he actually wrote The Aviator, which is a very good movie as well. So yeah, this movie came out, as I said, in 2003, and it would definitely be in the class of historical movies. It's kind of a historical fiction period film.
Yeah.
And it definitely is a sweeping epic. It has many large battle scenes. There's probably, 3... large battles.
It depends on how you define large battle. If you mean by upwards of 100 people, then yeah. It actually somehow the genre for this movie behind us is listed as compelling. Like that's the genre. It's not even an adjective to describe it. It's like it is in the compelling genre. And you know what? I would agree with that. This movie really gets the chill bumps going across the back.
It does.
When you're getting into it.
And part of that is, of course, the Hans Zimmer score.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you can't not mention that. There's this great board game that me and my buddies play sometime. I gotta have you play this game sometime. It's called Rising Sun. Have you played that game?
I feel like I've heard the name of it.
It's great. But we always play this soundtrack to it when we're playing, and we feel like true samurai. Because
which score?
Oh, A Small Measure of Peace.
Okay.
Yeah. It's great. So opinions on this movie. I mean, should we talk about the whole plot?
I think we can go into. I think we can probably edit this part out, yeah. But I think we can go into the. I think you can maybe, from like this point, kind of maybe go into the rest of the plot, kind of
the events. Yes. So, we'll just bounce back and forth. First of all, so Nathan Algren arrives in Japan to train this army of Japanese people because they're trying to westernize. Because historically speaking, try not to get into the historical section here, but Japan was coming out of a period called Japan's isolation, where they were completely isolated, as the name, implies, from the rest of the world, financially, in trade sense, culturally, definitely. And they were looking to open up their borders and get it going, and my brain's trying to pull into the history, away from the history to the plot. Okay.
So it's just so I'm sorry. I know we can edit something.
No, it's fine.
So you do what maybe up until the plot, maybe up through the fog battle, and then the first battle.
Yeah.
And then I can pick up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And we don't want to be too detailed with it. Just kind of generic.
But don't worry about chatting. Like just normal flowing chatting makes it sound good. Okay, anyway, he is training the army. He he's got this dude who used to be his commander who he hates a lot because he used to shoot Indian children, which is a big no-no, which, Nathan also participated in that, although he was trying to get it to stop, but in the end he let himself. And so he feels he's an alcoholic. He has a lot of regret for that. And so there's this rebellion going on in Japan where the samurai are trying to stop the westernization of the country. Nathan's like, man, I've already put down 2 different rebellions. Why not a third one? And he's training the army. But he didn't, he's like, as long as I don't have to kill anybody, basically, anybody more. And so then they're like, all right, it's been a couple weeks go by, and they're like, all right, we're going to go out and we're going to find Quasimodo. We've got way more men. We've got way more guns. We're fine. And there's this great scene where Nathan Algren pulls out a pistol in front of one of the Japanese soldiers, and he's like, shoot me or I will shoot you. And the guy's like...
In the scene, he is trying to prove that the army is not yet ready to go into battle.
He's not.
And he is correct.
Mm-hmm. So they pursue Quasimodo, who is the rebellion leader. They find him in the woods. They get their absolute butts kicked by the samurai. Total rout.
I was going to say, one of the most compelling parts of that scene, to me, is when you see the commanding general, not the one that is a samurai, not the one that was samurai, but he's the younger one, and he's running away, and he looks back, and he sees Algren fighting their battle for him, basically. Yes. He's just standing in there, taking out guys with his sword.
And then the Scottish dude's there, too.
Yep, and his Scottish buddy, his name eludes me, and these 2 Americans are like fighting the war for the Japanese.
Yeah.
And it's just a good shot when he looks back and he realizes.
And he learns from that, because later in the movie he learns courage.
The same character the end chooses to honor the samurai at the end.
He does learn a lot from that.
Yeah, he has a good character arc, I think.
So Algren gets left behind. He has this reoccurring theme of like just not being able to die, because that's the one thing he wants to do. He just wants to, he is so guilty that he just basically wants to go into battle and not come back. And I like this because it's an old trope. You might roll your eyes and say, oh, this always happens to the hero in stories. They go into the battle and somehow miraculously survive because the plot needs to happen. But I think The Last Samurai handles this well because it actually goes directly against Nathan Algren's goal of trying to die. And so it's actually honestly spitting in his face constantly. And so it's a great plot device. So he ends up like fending off 5 different samurai with this flag, and Quasimodo rides up and he sees that on the flag there's this tiger, and he had a dream at the beginning, or a vision more like at the beginning of the movie, of this tiger just like lashing out against these samurai that were surrounding him. He was like, what you got to cheetah? And he knows at that moment to spare.
And both of us, we found out, actually neither of us figured that out. That
no, it took me like 3 times watching the movie. This isn't my first time watching the movie. It took me like 3 times watching the movie. I was like, it's from the vision, from the beginning of the movie. That, Another important note about that scene: there's this guy who's like, and then he's like, that means he's mine, and he comes up with the sword. He's gonna finish him off, and Nathan I'm resisting the impulse to call him Tom Cruise. Nathan sits up and stabs him with the shard of wood and kills him. And I know that sounds totally irrelevant, but it will be relevant later.
All right, so following this battle, which people often refer to as the fog battle because it takes place in a giant fog in the woods, Algren is obviously Quasimodo decides to show mercy to Algren as he remembers his dream comes back to him, and he has this sense that he must not kill this man. And so he takes Algren back to the village, but before doing that, the general of the Japanese modern army, who was once a samurai, as we learned earlier in the movie, is executed by Quasimodo, and Algren sees this. And it seems to him like just a brutal act of barbarianism, but we will learn later it really is not.
Mercy.
And so Algren is taken to the village, and he is taken to the house of the wife of the man that he killed.
The one that got stabbed in the neck with the wood shard.
Yep. And
it's also Quasimodo's sister, by the way. So he killed Quasimodo's brother-in-law. And me and John were talking about this while watching the film. Why Quasimodo decided to have his sister, who just lost her husband to this guy take care of this guy. It seems like a huge spit in the face, but it's what he does. It's I guess, I don't know.
Yeah. So once Algren is in the house of Katsumoto's sister.
Is her name Kata or Kata?
Taka, I think is her name.
Taka.
And once he's in her house, he obviously doesn't understand why he's even there. He feels like he should be dead. And he is, I don't know if we mentioned this, but he's obviously an alcoholic at the beginning of the movie. A very severe alcoholic. And so when he first gets there, he demands sake, which is obviously a Japanese whiskey. And eventually they refuse to give it to him, specifically Taka does.
Yep.
And he is forced to go into a withdrawal. And this actually ends up curing him of his alcoholism during this part of the movie.
Yeah.
And so following, he begins to eventually assimilate a little bit into the culture of the Japanese. They allow him free roam.
Or the samurai, more
of the samurai, yes.
Yeah.
They allow him free roam of the village under
Except
a
this
guard.
guy follows him around
His name,
constantly.
he gives him the name Bob, because he does not talk and will not tell him his name. We actually do not really know if he can actually speak English, or if he understands anything.
He never talks in
Algren's
Japanese
saying.
or in English for the whole movie.
He only says Algren-san at the very end before he dies. I think that's the only thing he says. But also Algren begins to have these conversations with Katsumoto, and he learns that Katsumoto is a very wise man and that he is more than he seems. He's not just a warrior. And he talks with Katsumoto about subjects like the Battle of Little Bighorn. They talk about General Custer, who Algren fought for. And Katsumoto believes that Custer was a good general when he hears of his story. And Algren does not agree with that because he fought with the man. But this story comes back later in the movie in terms of what ends up happening at the end of the movie and the fate of Katsumoto. And Katsumoto continually talks to Algren about destiny, and he says, what's the quote where he says, he's like, maybe you can have a Katsumoto tells Algren that he wishes that he'll have a death like Custer had.
He's like, well, maybe you'll have one like that.
And Katsumoto says, if it is my destiny.
If it is my destiny.
So we get a lot of Japanese cultural kind of beliefs through the conversations. We learn a lot about Japanese culture through their conversations together. And eventually Katsumoto and Algren kind of become, I guess you would call them friends. I mean, they're not...
Yes.
At first, Algren views him as his enemy.
Yeah.
And I think Katsumoto views him as his enemy.
Yes.
Views Algren as his enemy. But eventually, they come to have a mutual respect for one another.
I have this is just a theory, though, right? I hate to break away from the plot synopsis, but the way Katsumoto treats Algren from the beginning, it's almost like he knows he's going to be his friend. It's almost like when he says we're going to keep him around because he's our enemy and we want to learn from our enemy, it's almost like it's an excuse to keep him around and not kill him. That's just reading Katsumoto's face or whatnot. It's
and ironically, Algren earlier in the movie said that he wants to know more of his enemy. In the scene where him and Mr. Simon Graham, who's this English translator that is kind of employed by Algren to help him learn more about the samurai, he tells Graham that he just wants to know more about his enemy. He's not interested in the ways of the samurai.
Yeah.
And later, obviously, Katsumoto says the same thing when Algren asks why he's still alive. He's like, I want to know more about my enemy.
Clearly, both of them have read The Art of War.
Yep.
So, yeah. Which is Chinese, not Japanese, by the way. So anyway, movies moving forward. It's a lot of time in the camp until the snow thaws. There's this ninja attack on the samurai village that's really awesome. But they fend off the ninjas.
And they don't know Algren. They assume that the ninjas are sent from Omura, who is this corrupt businessman who is trying to influence the emperor to basically kind of enslave themselves to every new Western idea without even
thinking about it. Yeah, so they get an invitation back to Tokyo. They go back to Tokyo, which is the imperial city, obviously. Katsumoto is very loyal to the emperor. He will kill himself if the emperor wants him to in a moment. The emperor doesn't know what to do because he's getting manipulated by all these different people, and he wants Katsumoto to just tell him what he wants to do, but Katsumoto refuses, and the emperor is bullied into passing a law against samurai. So that lets these other corrupt politicians corner Katsumoto into a situation where he has to be executed. But Algren comes in, brings the samurai bros to save him at the last minute. They bust out. They head back to the samurai village. They raise an army.
Yep. However, a key point is that the son of Katsumoto,
Dies.
who had been disgraced when they came back into Tokyo because they cut off his top knot,
He dies.
He sacrifices himself to give them time to escape Tokyo.
Yes.
And it's a real heroic death, and it's
great.
It's
although
a great scene in the movie.
Algren totally ruins it because he like runs up the hill and he like watches the entire thing, and I'm sitting there thinking he's buying you time.
Yeah.
Just don't just stand there.
I got that from a dramatic standpoint, though. He's befriended also. He's basically become friends with all these guys, and he obviously befriended.
Yeah.
I think his name. I'm forgetting his name, but he
He's
befriended the
Katsumoto's
son of
son,
Katsumoto's son. It was actually his village that they were staying in during the winter. But and also we got to point out that Bob, who is the
he got
old
of
ninja
20
guy
kills.
that watches over Algren in the village, goes absolutely ham on some Imperial soldiers, and he kills at least 20 with his
He
bow
was
and arrow.
so effective. He looked like your older cousin on Bang Energy Drink playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 at 3 a.m. That's what he looked like. That's how effective he was at killing everyone.
Yeah, I mean, in the movie, they notch their arrows to their bows so fast. The samurai,
it's not even
like,
right.
not
They're
even
like
funny.
it's. I'll get to this in the historical bit about the rifles and stuff, but anyway, back to the samurai village. They raise an army. They talk about the Battle of Thermopylae and how they're going to make a symbol rather than try to win. And there's this insane, awesome battle at the end. They get torn up by Gatling guns at the end. Algren survives somehow. He takes a bunch of bullets and he's like, it's like all to the arms and legs. His curse continues for him to keep living. But he ends up getting to return to the Imperial palace, give the Emperor his sword, and the Emperor realizes that he has to remember the ways of the samurai, and he turns down some of the Western agreements, tells him that it is not in the best interest of his people, and then the corrupt businessman is like, what was his name? Omura is like, this is, he was wagging his finger at that, and he's like, well, if it's too shameful, then you can just, use
yourself.
this. And so that is how the movie ends with the epic line where he comes up to Algren and he's like, tell me how he died, because he's his teacher, and then Algren looks at him and he says, I will tell you how he lived. And
good line.
Yeah,
and the music is just like swelling in the
amazing.
background. I mean, we gotta talk about like the Hans Zimmer score. I mean, it's up there with his best. It's not his best, but it's up there.
I'm trying to think. I mean, Interstellar might have it by a little bit, but
Gladiator's also up
Gladiator's
there.
really good.
This one I would put above Gladiator.
Yes, I would.
Gladiator is more. This one has they're close, but I think this, in my opinion, this one has more of that dramatic kind of slower music. Gladiator is almost all like the heroic like battle music. So I think I would put this one a little bit above the Gladiator score. But it's Hans Zimmer. I mean, there's nothing he does that isn't.
I've never seen the man touches stuff and it turns to gold.
Yeah, I mean,
he can make two notes into the most epic theme ever. If you remember the Batman theme, where it's like, blah, blah, it's just two notes and it's like the most epic thing.
I thought that was Interstellar.
No, that's Batman.
I thought the Interstellar was just the one that's basically two notes.
You're right.
Yeah, that's Interstellar.
But I'm thinking about Batman, where it's like, dwah, dwah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about too. But Interstellar, he kind of does the same thing.
He does.
He was so simple.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's not necessarily like too. It doesn't sound very complex. It's a lot of simple kind of.
It's a lot of woodwinds. A lot of woodwinds involved in there. So anyway, the movie ends. Algren goes back to the village, and he ends up getting with the lady whose husband he murdered. We skipped over that subplot, but we only have so much time. So let's talk about history. Okay.
Or do we want to talk first just a few about like what our final kind of what we would rate the movie?
Oh right. The movie is
just kind of. Or do we want to do themes
being
first?
My favorite movie, it's a 10. I mean, maybe I give it a 9.9 because nothing's perfect.
Yep.
But it's my favorite. I think my list right now goes The Last Samurai, Kingdom of Heaven, Top Gun Maverick, maybe The Dark Knight Rises at number 4, and then 5 would be like Interstellar or something.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely, like I said, I would put it, it's definitely in my top 5. I'd probably, My favorite right now is probably Braveheart. It's been there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
This would probably come in at number 2 would probably right now be, I'm going to say probably, I want to say this one has jumped The Patriot for maybe the number 3rd spot.
That's a lot.
Patriot
That's
would be
saying a
in
lot.
4. Number 2 would probably right now be, it might be Kingdom of Heaven, like his is. Kingdom of Heaven's a big one on my list. Either that or Gladiator. I go back and forth. Gladiator or Kingdom of Heaven.
Really
I
good.
love them both. They're both obviously by Ridley Scott.
The movie, I feel like anyone can respect the movie at least, but I think that it's a 10 or a 9.9 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the best for me because it really resounds on themes and lessons that are very important to me.
Yeah, I would rate it probably definitely a 9.5.
Yeah,
as close as you
9.
can get.
Yeah, 9.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect,
yeah.
but
that
this
Lord of the
it
Rings?
gets pretty dang close to
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, so I guess I'd put this at number 3 behind Gladiator and
Lord of the Rings.
Braveheart.
Oh, Braveheart.
The Lord of the Rings is definitely up there.
Lord of the Rings is like above everything. It's
Individually,
not
the-
even in the rankings.
Out of the
system.
individual movies, The Return of the King is definitely in my top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like 4 or 5 in there. But anyway, so yeah, and then do you want to move on to themes or do you want to
Let's talk about history.
Okay.
Let's talk about the history. A lot of historical topics are covered in this movie, and I am fascinated by history, so
Me
I'd
too.
love to get into it. So first of all, Nathan Algren, was he a real person? No. However, I looked into it a little bit, and there is a similar story about a man getting assimilated into samurai culture, but this man was French, and I don't know the details on that. Nathan Algren was not a real person.
I've heard
though.
that. Yeah, I've heard that too.
There was a Frenchman who had similar experiences, kept a journal in the same way that Nathan Algren does in the movie. Was Katsumoto a real person? Strangely enough, he's a caricature of a real person. There was a leader who led the samurai revolt.
From what I've read and I've seen a video on the historical accuracy of this, and the way it's based on it's kind of a like you said, a miscaricature of this of a samurai lord who was in rebellion against the emperor. It wasn't so much for honor; it was more for he didn't want to lose all of his wealth and land. Which I guess he might have viewed that as his honor. Anyway, but this movie definitely doesn't go in that direction with the character. But it is based on a real person.
Yes, he's based,
just
but his
not-
name
not
wasn't
in his name,
Katsumoto.
Nope.
Loosely based on a real person, so I don't know if you could say that or not. Another thing you might ask if another thing that you might ask if it is real or not is the U.S. Japanese relations. The answer of which would be kind of, because yes, they were having these kind of relations with Western nations in general, but it is
the America was not as heavily involved as they portray in the movie.
Yes.
They were not in battle. They were not in battle fighting with the Japanese.
No.
They were more like supplying arms and getting. As much as it'll record.
I don't know. It's still counting.
Oh yeah, it is.